And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. Father, this morning I thank you, God, for your presence. God, I thank you that you are here, God, and that you choose us. I thank you, God, that you desire to be in and through our lives, God.
Yes, God.
God, so my prayer this morning,
Yes,
Lord, as I just share about the good things that you've done in my life, God, that it will reach people, Father, that it's not my words, God, but your words.
Yes, God.
And God, I pray that every heart and every ear is just open to receive, Father,
Yes, God.
your goodness, God.
Yes,
That at the end of the day, we just get to walk away with your kindness, with your love that draws us in.
Yes, God.
Father, I thank you for this church. I thank you for what you're doing in this church and for everyone that's here. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
You guys can be seated. I'll start off by saying that I've always been the type of person that desires to know the truth and to live with a purpose beyond anything else. I think anybody that has grown up with me knows that I always gotta look for that purpose. I'm always about the purpose, the deeper meaning in life. And so today I get the privilege to share with you guys just about that journey and what God has done in me. Like I said before, Greg and Tanya are my parents. Grew up in a big family. I'm the oldest of 8. Crazy, awesome, joyful, exciting, and sometimes more passionate than others, brothers and sisters, that I'm so happy to have as my family. I grew up in church all my life. In fact, as a kid, I attended Crossroads Church, if some of you are familiar with. Pastor Gary and Shirley used to actually lead that church back in the day. It's where I grew up. Ever since, I think right as I was born, I just got brought right into the church. So I didn't know anything other than the church life. In the year of 1999, this actually the winter of 99, we moved to Blanchard, where I would call my home for the next many years. As some of you guys know, and I think it's hilarious that the little comedian up here on the TV was talking about being homeschooled. Boy, I tell you what, that's some funny stuff, because that resonates with a lot of who I am. I'm like, my parents were trying to get me out when I was like 17. No, I'm kidding. I spent a lot of time at home, obviously, getting to know my family and every and all aspects of life. I started learning guitar. It was actually my brother Joseph who wanted to learn guitar first, and I remember going to a guitar lesson with him, and my mom was like, "You should just go to try it out." And I was like, "Okay." So I go there, and next thing you know, I'm the one that's taking the lessons, and not my brother Joseph. Fast forwarding to 2007. In 2007, I remember sitting in my room and I plugged in this DVD of Hillsong United, and it was their world tour album. And I just remember watching them tour the world and doing mission work like I've never seen before. So getting up on stage, singing, playing guitar, playing all the instruments, and then getting out and then going and touching and reaching the people that were around them. And it just blew my mind. And I remember sitting there in that chair playing the guitar, and God just came down and spoke to me and said, "This is what you're going to do." And I remember just being so overwhelmed by the Holy Spirit. I've never felt anything before like that in my entire life, and I didn't know what to do. I just started crying, and I said, "Okay, God, this is your life and not mine." But I never actually responded to that because, quite frankly, I thought the title was lame. I thought, who wants to be a minister these days? Like, that's for other people. I want to be the guy that makes money, be the guy that helps people. Ministries is not for my thing. And as I grew up, I experienced more of that pull away from what God had called me to do. At the age of 14, I was exposed to pornography, specifically a pornography magazine underneath a bridge when me and my friends were exploring this river we stumbled across this magazine, and I'll never forget that feeling of like, I cannot believe that I'm just like seeing this. I don't know what I'm looking at. And it was just something that would shake my world for a long time, and unfortunately would walk through that door and wouldn't come out for a while. At that age, I think I was 14 years old. I also started to play volleyball. And I know what you guys are thinking, like, wow, volleyball, all sports you can play. You know, I'm tall, and I wanted to, be athletic and everything. And actually, I remember coming up to my mom, and I said, Mom, I want to play a sport. And she goes, okay. And I go, yeah, I want to play for the Blanchard Lions. And she goes, well, first of all, you have to do better in school, you have to do this, you have to do that, and you have to get your driver's license, because I don't want to take you to practice all the time. Yeah, come on, we're just right down the street, like, everything is going to be fine. So, unfortunately, I didn't get to play football. I started playing in a homeschool volleyball league, and that was actually the most social environment that I really honestly at that age was exposed to. Being at home all the time, learning, and then having my friends in Blanchard, but now stepping into this atmosphere of competition, adrenaline, testosterone, and a lot of it. And it was crazy to me, and for the first time I felt peer pressure. And I've never actually felt that kind of peer pressure before, but what that obviously caused me to do, and I think any person at that age under that kind of peer pressure, is to try to stand up and to prove yourself. And so as you probably would expect, this is where I began to exercise and really work on my image. And I actually have a Bible verse in Proverbs 19:21. If you have your Bibles, you can open that. If not, it'll be on the screen. And in Proverbs 19:21, it says, "Many are the plans in the mind of a man, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will stand." And if I would have read that verse and actually understood it at that time, I think things might have been a lot different, but I know that God had other plans for my life. At 18 years old, after playing volleyball for the last 4 years, really thriving in it, I felt really good about myself. I was really in shape. I was eating really healthy. At 18 years old, I finished volleyball, and I remember kind of like coming to this place of like, okay, what do I want to do with my life? I've been working with my dad the whole time, who's a painting contractor, and I said, I kind of just want to make money. I mean, honestly, a show of hands, who here wants to make money? It's the thing, man. You gotta live by money. Money helps you live. So I decided not to finish school and to jump into the work life. Working with my dad as a painter, I quickly learned how, for one, dirty I could get, and how dirty, sinful, and broken this world really is. And in the fall of 2013, after working with my dad for a while, I decided to branch off on my own and start working for a company called Kimray. If any of you guys have heard of that, it's a great company. Around that time is also when I had my first girlfriend for a short period of time, who I would lose my virginity to. And I remember in that moment, as a homeschool kid who was just trying to kind of pave his way, out of the narrative a little bit of being this stereotypical like homeschool kid. I wanted to do something, and so I got a girlfriend, I got a new job, and then I lost my virginity to her. And that's one thing that my parents always taught me to save, and how important it really is to people. And most of the time, people think like, well, it's if you lose your virginity, that's okay. It's like, yes, it's okay, but at the same time, there's something that's so amazing and so pure when you have that. And actually, I believe that when Jesus redeems your life, when you say yes to Jesus and to all of his promises, that he calls you a virgin again.
Yeah.
I believe that with 100%, that he calls you a virgin again, and that you can believe that for yourself. Yep. And so when that happened to me, I remember sitting in the car on my way home, and just filled with so much shame and so much regret, and coming home. I think it took a couple of days to tell my mom, and I remember just crying and saying, "Mom, I'm so sorry. Dad, I'm so sorry. I can't believe that I did this," and just I felt that so heavily. So during this time at this company called Kimray, it was the first job outside of my family that I was able to have. And it was pretty crazy. In fact, I worked alongside with an atheist and a Christian, and not just any Christian, but a Calvinist Christian. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with Calvinism and all of the root beliefs, but it's pretty intense. There's a lot of great things about Calvinism, but there's also some things that will actually draw you into religion and tradition rather than into the freedom of Christ. And so the dynamic working with these two men was literally crazy. And every day at work, we would engage into some sort of conversation about whether God was real, or the legitimacy of the Bible. Did Moses actually split the Red Sea? What are the chariots really at the bottom of the sea? Did somebody put those there? And there was many times where we just continued to engage into that, and I learned a lot, and I just remember saying to myself, like, ooh, I really love this. I enjoy learning about this. This is good stuff. If anybody needs to know something, they need to know that if there's a God or if there's not a God. And I'm on the side of, hey, there's a God. I believe there's a God. And then I have my friend over here who's saying, dude, you're crazy. And actually he called it cloud cake, which I'll never forget. I remember when he said that, I was like, I wanted to shove some of that cake in his face. Yeah, that was fun. So this caused me to be obviously very passionate about my belief, so much so that I actually began to call myself a Calvinist because I didn't know anything other. I just knew that reading the Bible and learning the Bible was a good thing, and that was going to make me smarter. And so I continued to do that. I continued to research, to learn as much as I can, and before I knew it, I called myself a Calvinist. That year is also the year that I got saved, and I'll never forget it. Even though I grew up in church all of my life, I would say that doesn't call you saved. That doesn't call you into the kingdom just because you attend a church. In fact, when you have an encounter with the Holy Spirit and you realize the depth and the authenticity of the gospel of Jesus and how he died on the cross. And I was sitting at the bar of my kitchen, my parents' kitchen, and I was watching a video, and forgive me, I don't know the speaker that was talking, but he was Calvinist, and I remember him saying, he was up on stage, and he had the mic, and he was walking back and forth like this, and he says, Do you not know what Jesus has done for you? While we're sitting here doing everything that we want to do, Jesus came down from heaven, died on a cross for your sin. You were sitting in the cesspool of your own filth, of your own anxiety, all of it, all of the sin. And he came down and he rescued you. Do you not know? And I was watching this video and I'm just like, apparently not. And I was so shook by this video. And I think sometimes for us as people, it takes a great awakening for us to really get it. It takes something far more than just the words, I love you and I died for you, to really get the power. And for me, that was the case. So being in this passionate state of mind was really fun, engaging constantly, and I felt smarter than ever. But in 2015, I began to question my faith, and I thought, what is faith? What's the meaning of faith, and why does God talk about it so much? And I remember my atheist friend looking at me, and he says, what about the scripture in the Bible where it says, where Jesus says, have faith like a child? There's the kingdom of heaven. And I said, I don't know. I never really thought about that before. And every now and then, he'd bring that verse back up to me, and he says, why does the Bible say have faith like a child? It just seems foolish to me. I don't know. It seems foolish. And after a while, that started to get to me, and I really started to question, what is faith? Why does the Bible say, have faith like a child? And unfortunately, I walked down this road of blindness And after some months, I asked myself, if I can't answer these questions to back up my faith, then why do I believe in it? Why do I believe in Jesus if I can't prove his existence, if I can't prove the power of God? In the fall of 2015, I'll never forget the moment. I was sitting in this little paint booth that was connected to a bigger paint booth, and I was a painter at Kimray. I remember sitting in this booth, and at the time we were studying Egyptian symbolism and Hebrew symbolism and how closely knit they kind of were together. I just began to ask myself those questions again, and then all of a sudden reality hit me. And I felt the presence of God leave. And I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. I can't back up my faith. Why am I believing you if I can't prove you? And I'll never forget that moment when the Spirit of God left me. And I like to tell it as the time of Adam and Eve when they took the bite of the apple. And it says their eyes were both open to the knowledge of good and evil. And if you could just bring yourself into that picture of what it's actually like to have your eyes both open to both good and evil, the depths and the power of sin and loneliness and separation from Jesus and not knowing anything else. And then on the contrary, looking at the relationship that you had with Jesus and the fullness that you have with him. And I remember at the end of the day, I just was like, what am I going to say? I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to tell my parents. I don't know how I'm going to go about this. And I'll never, of course, forget. There was a lot of memories that I'll never forget. Well, actually, let me back up and say, almost 1 year prior, on October 27th, 2014, I was writing in my journal, confessing things to God and telling him that, God, I'm ready for more. I want more. I want to mature in you. And this is 1 year prior, mind you. But the last words that I wrote in that journal, it's still the last words that I wrote in that journal, which is only about a third of the way full. I'll never forget. And I remember I wrote, "You are so good, God. Please continue to fill me and do not let me go, ... 1 year prior. And I believe that God had a plan, and obviously did have a plan for my life greater than I could ever imagine, and that he would let me begin to walk down this road of atheism and blasphemy to show me the truth of who he really is. It was a couple weeks before I told my parents. You can imagine the reaction. I remember telling my mom, weeks after telling my mom, and I looked at her and I said, I will never step foot in a church again. Yeah, psych. Yeah, and I just was so filled with anger. And I think, honestly, if I could relate myself to one person in the Bible, it would be Paul, or Saul, rather, before he became Paul. And I remember in that time of just so much anger and so much frustration of like, why do you people believe in something that you can't prove to exist? Why? It just drives me bonkers. I mean, I'm homeschooled. I didn't finish school. And I'm over here and I think, there's tons of people out here in these churches making money, living fun lives and all that stuff. And I'm saying, hey, God doesn't exist. And I got the evidence to prove it right here. So you can imagine this passion, this anger stirring inside of me now to want to prove Christians wrong. And I so badly wanted to do that. And it drove me almost insane. Most people thought that I denied Jesus because I wanted to try out the things of this world. But that's not what my motive was. I didn't consider myself to have a complete education. And so this lie that I was a failure and not good enough blinded me. And I was driven by that blindness to know as much as I possibly could. And in fact, I believe that knowing God and proving God's existence is at the top of all knowledge, because that can ultimately cripple somebody if in fact that is their true core belief, and that could cripple their lives. And so I didn't get the chance to really tell people because I still wanted to uphold some morality. I didn't want to be that guy that went out to parties and drank. I was still known as the homeschool kid. I still did the right things, but I just didn't believe in God. And so, unfortunately, I couldn't convince most people that my motive was to know truth rather than to try the things of this world. But as you can probably expect, going down this road of unbelief, chasing rapidly after it, I started to try things. I started to try sex. I started to try drugs. I started to try alcohol. In fact, that's what began to be all I knew. All I knew was alcohol, and all I knew was drugs, and all I knew was sleeping around. And that's who I surrounded myself with, and so that's what I did most of my time. But during this, I kept researching for answers, but in the wrong department. In fact, in my search bar, it said, how to prove that God doesn't exist. I just want to take a second and say, if you ever got on Google and you've ever tried to research something, if you put in there, we'll just use this example, for instance, how to prove that God doesn't exist. Folks, I'm no genius, but that whole Google page is going to be filled with articles about how God doesn't exist. And if you don't believe me, I would suggest you try that and then let me know what you think afterwards. And it's the same on the contrary, how to prove that God does exist. You'll find plenty of evidence for that. So you really can imagine this dynamic that I was in, searching for truth, because ultimately my purpose, my passion was to find my purpose. I wanted to find my purpose in this world. If you have a Bible, we'll turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 18 through 19. If you don't have it, it's up on the screen. It says, "For the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart." Flip over one page to chapter 2, verse 14. It says, "The natural person does not accept the things of the Spirit of God, for they are folly to him, and he is not able to understand them because they are spiritually discerned." Mm-hmm. So as you can see, the Bible proves that point perfectly. I was walking in blindness. I was walking in selfishness. And so I couldn't understand the things of the spiritual world because I was giving it no thought. I was giving it no edge to take place in my life. I had that door slammed shut, deadbolted with 5 locks, and put an anvil in front of. There was no way that faith was going to reach my heart because I wanted facts. I wanted raw evidence. As I continued down this, obviously, like I said before, I started to lose most of my conviction. And what I mean by conviction is conviction for morality, for respecting your elders, for keeping a clean mouth, for not overdosing on alcohol or drugs or all this stuff. I just started to say, nah, it's okay, I'll just try it because why not? All my friends are trying it. I might as well do it too because that's all I know. And I just remember slowly but surely, I started just to feel tired, and I started to feel burdened because people didn't seem real anymore. Everyone seemed fake around me. And for those of you who have true friends, God bless you. And for those of you that don't feel like you have friends, A, God is your friend, and B, He's sending more friends. Right. But it's our job to be open to that. And I think it's super awesome that prayer has just been the narrative of this church, and that this 12-step program is calling you guys and everyone that's in here to connect. And there's something that is super special about that hopefully I have time to get to here in a minute. So as I started to pursue all these things of sex, drugs, alcohol, pretty much anything you can imagine, I began to also pursue other career options. And just for a fun reference, I want to turn to Proverbs 16, verses 9. I'll read that for you real quick. It says, the heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps. And as I was reading that earlier this week, whenever the Lord just kind of brought this stuff up to my mind, I remember reading that, and it was so funny, and I love how alive and present the Bible is today. Yeah. Because I'm telling you what, you guys, when people say, oh, that's old history, that's far back, what I like to do is I start in Job, because in Job, it actually talks about science, and it actually talks about the earth being a sphere. Yes. I mean, isn't that mind-blowing? Yes. To me, I just thought that was crazy, and I actually didn't even see that until I was coming out of my atheism phase, but that just blew my mind to know that the first book ever written in the Bible was the book of Job, and it talks about the earth being a sphere and not flat. That's awesome, man. That is just so cool. I love that. It's a mind-blowing thing. But also, in Proverbs 16, verse 9, when it says, the heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps. Here I was, paving my own way in this world, trying to find my purpose, right? Yeah. Start pursuing other career options, and it just seemed really like, this isn't my thing, but I'm going to do it anyway. And in my mind, I had all these plans of doing all this awesome stuff. I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to go to Colombia or Cuba, or I'm going to go to LA, or I'm going to go over to Canada, or heck, I don't know, maybe even Japan, see how those people are over there. But the Lord establishes your steps. And let me tell you something. When you're walking in a purpose that you are called to, that I believe everyone in this room is called to, God establishes your steps.
Yes. Amen.
Come on, God establishes your steps.
Yes,
when you say yes and amen to His promises, to His commandments, you don't have to worry about tomorrow. And in fact, in Matthew 6, it talks about many times, do not be anxious about tomorrow. Do not be anxious about your clothing. Do not be anxious about what you're going to eat, for God knows. And how much more will He clothe and feed us, just as Solomon was.
Yep.
I mean, it's huge. So here I am, paving my own way. And again, I wish I would have read this verse, because I probably would have laughed to myself and said, well, I'm not going to get very far then. So as I continued to indulge into these things, there were a lot of moments when I was tired. I would look up to the sky, and I was, even when I was sober, and especially when I was under the influence of a drug, of an alcohol, I would yell up to God, and I would say, well, I say God, at that time I was just yelling up to this guy. I didn't know who I was talking to. I'd yell up, I'd say, if you're out there, then would you show yourself to me? If you're really out there, then prove yourself. I'm tired of this. My friends would look at me and they were like, that Rylan guy's crazy. See you, dude. But in my mind, I wanted to know. In July of 2016, I started dating a young lady that I would date for almost 2 years. And in this relationship, God began to move. Her mom was a devout Christian that loved everyone unconditionally, including me. And I want to kind of go back. I think I might have missed this part, but I want to go back and say that as I pursued atheism and this belief that there was no God whatsoever, I started to, well, you can imagine, disconnect from my family and everyone that declared they were Christian or that gave thought to being a Christian. I started to push them away. Hey, if you're a Christian, I don't want to hang out with you because you're going to try to talk to me about Jesus. You're going to try to pray for me. I'm just not about that, man. I think you're crazy. Funny note, I thought that there was one time where my mom, and I want to say this because I want you to understand how serious people are when they're blinded with a lie, when they're blinded and living in unbelief. When my mom would pray for me, or try to pray for me, in this state of unbelief, I would freak out. If you think about the worst time, you're just like, well, I gotta go, I gotta get out of here, like, I don't know what's going on, but something's happening, I just gotta bolt. That was me. I remember hearing her praying and speaking in tongues, and I just tried to hold my composure, rejecting any kind of thing that was trying to come in, that wanted to come in, and I started getting like hot flashes and sweating, and I'm like, I just can't do this. You guys are crazy. I don't know what you're talking to. I don't know what you're doing. That was the reality of my heart. That was the reality of my mind. And there's thousands of people out there that are broken just like I was. Slowly but surely, I started to realize how shallow people really were. I felt no authenticity in relationships. This caused me to start learning again and start learning why people were so shallow. In my researching, I found that 90+% of people who believed that God existed, not just a Christian God, but that a God existed, also had a deep conviction for community and for relationships. I thought to myself, I'll be darned. I'll be stinking darned. And that just began to start changing things in my mind. And unfortunately, I really gave no thought and time to my family. I was completely disconnected, and all I wanted was my girlfriend, my friends, the parties, the drugs, and the alcohol. Fast forwarding a little, after going from an atheist to a deist, where I came from this place of not believing in a God whatsoever, to now believing that, okay, there's a God. I think I can believe that at least there's a God, but there's no way there's a Christian God. There's no way there's a God that would get personal with you, answer your prayers, and actually do things for you, much less even talk to you. There's no way. So I declared myself to be a deist, to deeply entertaining this belief of a God that I sifted through the main predominant religions. And I want to tell you, I'm not a smart guy. There's going to be more of that topic here in a little bit. But I wanted to know, and so I went through Allah, Buddhist, all of the main religions that are predominant in this world. And you'll never guess what I found. Fill you guys in on a little secret. The true God of this universe, the God that created your heart, the God that formed you in your mother's womb before you were born, that we call Jesus Christ, that's the God that stood the test. To every bit of research that I started to do, I started looking for the power of God rather than things and letters in the book